Good evening. It's just a little bit after 7. We have full council here. Everybody's here, so we have a quorum. We do have disposition of a set of minutes from the infamous session held on September 2nd, 2014. Anybody want to move
what you put in for the front of the house,
to accept
whether
that?
it's the address to
I move to accept the minutes.
deal
I
with
second.
Okay. All those in favor of accepting the minutes from the regular session held September 2nd, 2014, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay. We have disposed of the minutes. We have any communications in a while?
No, just thank everybody for the Essence of Athens participation we did last week. That's the only thing I could think of.
Okay. Other elected officials? Whatever have?
No report.
No?
Yeah, Mr. President, just briefly, I wanted to mention that we did have received the notice of the intent to negotiate from the Fraternal Order of Police, which has 3 bargaining units within the Athens Police Department. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that we'll be asking for an executive session, most likely at one of the October meetings, to go over the parameters of our negotiation.
Thank you. And we have a communication from Chief Heil. Actually, Captain Harvey sent this, alerting citizens to a potential telephone scam involving Athens City Water Service. The scammer advises that the customer's water is overdue and their water will be turned off if the customer doesn't pay immediately over the telephone. This is not the way Athens City handles utilities billing. And if you have any questions, please call utilities billing before you answer one of these scams. Call utilities billing at 592-3347. Thank you. We're going to move right along for ordinances for second reading. Ordinance 8114, an ordinance authorizing the purchase of road salt for the street department and softening salt for the water treatment plant and declaring an emergency. Ordinance 8214, an ordinance closing Park Place and a portion of Court Street on Tuesday, September 30th, 2014, with a rain date set for Wednesday, October 1st, 2014, from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. for a barbecue sponsored by the Joint Police Advisory Council, JPAC, and declaring an emergency. Member Patton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend 8214.
second.
And the reason for suspension is that this date is rapidly approaching and we wouldn't have enough time to do all of the readings, and we need to get everything organized. Just as a reminder, this is sponsored by the Joint Police Advisory Council, JPAC, as a meet and greet with our city and OU police departments. So we're encouraging everyone to come. There will be food, and I think even maybe the horses might be out. I don't know. But to meet with everyone. Mayor?
Again, it's put together by both chiefs and JPAC. It's a barbecue. It's on front of Baker, Upper Baker. Just to remind everybody, what is it, 5 to 9, I believe, right?
I think it's actually probably 6 to 8.
Oh, yeah, and 5, well, yeah.
That's when we need to set up. But I'm not.
It's 6 to 8.
Yes, 6 to 8.
Come and find out.
Is it free? Help set up.
And it is free.
Yes.
It is free.
And we're inviting all
Community
citizens.
members, yes, and students alike.
Yes.
Long-term residents, short-term residents, so they get to know each other.
All residents.
That's the point. All those in favor of suspending the rules on ordinance 8214 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
So I move to adopt?
Ordinance 8214.
Yes.
Second. All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 8214 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The ordinance is adopted. We'll move on to ordinances for first reading. Ordinance 8314, an ordinance amending Athens City Code, Title 9, Chapter 9.14, nuisance parties, sections 9.14.03, orders to cease and desist, and 9.14.99 penalty. Member Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, we discussed this in length in committee last week in changing this particular ordinance to where the nuisance party ordinance on the first offense becomes a civil penalty as opposed to a criminal offense, which in essence decriminalizes on the first offense. Second offense, within a set amount of time, criminal charges come into play. But there has been a change to this particular ordinance, something that has just come to light in the fee structure. So I'm going to turn this over to our law director, Pat Lang.
Thank you, Member Patterson. And I can remember from my days on City Council, I would always get frustrated sometimes when when an ordinance is being introduced before the full council, when a member of the administration or the law director would come in with changes, because I would always think to myself, you've had all this time, there's been committee hearings, and now you're going to come in here at the very last minute with recommendations, and so I do apologize if that is exactly what I'm doing to you all here this evening. But in reviewing this ordinance, and I've had the opportunity to speak already with the mayor, the service safety director, and earlier with Member Patterson about this, I had noticed that the $250 fine was not, that should that be appealed into court, that was not being appealed as a misdemeanor 4, but rather as a minor misdemeanor, for which the maximum penalty, if convicted, would be a $150 fine as opposed to $250, and that it was only on the second offense committed within the 6 months or for a failure to desist, and that in that case, that would jump things up to a misdemeanor 4 and a $250 fine. So my recommendation on this would be really one of two things. Either one, that the fine could be reduced on a first offense from a $250 to a $150, or suppose the other option would be to up the level of criminal penalty from a minor misdemeanor to a 4th degree misdemeanor for a first offense, which of course would then also necessitate, if we were going to keep the second offense for failure to for a second offense within 6 months, that would be bumped up then to an M3 and a maximum $500 penalty. So in my discussions with Chairman Patterson, he informed me that his preference would be to go the first route, to go from 250 to 150. But like I said, I think there are some options that council can explore on that, and I do apologize for the last-minute nature of that, but thought that it would this is something that should be raised prior to introduction. So thank you, Member Patterson.
Thank you, Member Fall.
These are set by Ohio Revised Code.
That's correct.
I'd like to point out that it seems that every time we try to up our fines that we're running into the Ohio Revised Code. It seems that maybe we need to let our representatives know that their fines are wimpy and they need to get with the times. So, I mean, $100, $20, $50. So what's the difference between the two misdemeanors that
They're just various levels of fine. So a minor misdemeanor is the lowest level of criminal conduct that one can be convicted of in the state of Ohio. Comes with a maximum fine of $150 and no possible jail time. A misdemeanor 4 comes with a maximum fine of $250 and up to 30 days in jail. And because jail time is a possibility on an M4, that also allows a defendant, somebody charged with one of these offenses, basically jury trial rights attach at that point, and so they would be able to have a full jury trial on those. And a 3rd degree misdemeanor, which is not currently contemplated within the ordinance here, that would be a $500 fine and up to 60 days in jail.
Right. What about the record keeping? Which ones go on the books?
Everything. I mean, it's all a permanent record unless someone were to be able to have that expunged at a later date, which oftentimes you would be eligible for expungement after a certain amount of time, depending on prior records or any other misconduct. But generally speaking, it's something that unless further action were taken by the person who was convicted or pled guilty, that would be something that stays on your permanent criminal record.
So that seems a little confusing.
of this whole thing to take the criminality out of the first offense?
Right. I don't want to speak for the folks who drafted the legislation.
I mean, the idea was that, okay, you have a nuisance party, you make a mistake, you pay a fine, but it's not on your record. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
because the way
it
that-
seemed that we don't want to go in that direction then with any of these options. So I would say we go with the reduced fine and keep the criminal part out until the next time, which I believe is the intent of this.
To the extent anyone cares what I think about it, I think that would be the appropriate way to go by trying not to tread too heavily here.
So it's just the number, it's just our fine that's within the wording as it is now.
The only change we would be making
Would
would
be
just be to go
100.
from 250 to 150 for a first-time offense. The second-time offense would still be the same.
Okay.
And again, this has been, Member Pappy?
Well, we discussed this at length last week.
We did.
And people spoke to us and explained all this, and I thought that this maybe wording a lot of it had been vetted already, so I'm a little frustrated. So you gave,
understand.
you gave your little talk and shared that, but we spent great lengths talking about this, so, and I know we can't talk anymore, so I think the idea with the lowering of the criminality was to put a hefty fine on it. Now we're being told we can't do that, so
I'm not telling you you can't do that. I'm saying that.
Well, if it's not Ohio Revised Code, we can't do it.
Not as a minor misdemeanor, right? You'd have to raise the level of criminal.
Could you put in, like, if we lobby the Ohio legislature, and instead of putting an amount, say, to the highest possible limit allowed by Ohio Revised Code?
Well, that's what you would essentially do by having it as a minor misdemeanor, right? Because then that would have the automatic caps on that. So if the intent here is to decriminalize, then, we're kind of, taking it out of the realm of criminal conduct and just saying we're going to impose this administrative fine. Then I think you're more or less, should be tied to whatever the corresponding level of misdemeanor would be. The legal process here is to go be cited into court on a minor misdemeanor. Then you would be potentially, if convicted of a minor misdemeanor, your penalty would be less than that of the initial administrative fine. I know that was a whole mouthful right there. I don't know if that that made sense, but basically you're saying that if you appeal it, you're going to get a lower penalty if convicted, which is probably, you can go that way, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that inconsistency.
Other comments? Member Butler?
I appreciate the updates as well. I would probably echo the concerns that Member Pappy echoed and said that I think the higher fine was what we were striving towards, as well as decriminalizing the violation. But I guess I'm in a quandary myself here. I mean, I don't want to make this a bigger issue than it needs to be, but I was in favor of the higher fines as well. So
I should add with this whole conversation that, Athens Police Department, the law enforcement will still act when they
Sure.
need to act on closing down any party that's gone out of control. The fine has been a long, ongoing process to where we've been speaking with JPAC, with CARD, the coalition, and at the end of the day, through my lens, the 150 fine to get the ball rolling to where within a 6-month period of time, if there was a second offense, then it does become a criminal offense, and that individual does have the record. We've worked long and hard trying to negotiate back and forth across the field and trying to make sure that our community, we're working in a responsible way, but also in a fair and balanced way with doing this. I, too, was lobbying hard for the 250, but hearing this new information, it makes sense in that we go with the lesser amount. But again, that said, that if there's a second offense, whether it's 2 days later or 6 months later, it incurs a heavier penalty at the end of the day.
Could I say something?
Mr. President?
Chief Pyle sat here and spoke eloquently about taking the criminality away from a first offense here, and we're being told that we're putting it right back. So I think we need to revise the fine. Yeah, and not accept the, not accept that more onerous fine. Yeah,
I understand you're saying, right, keeping it the civil penalty in play.
yes.
So it would need an amendment.
Either way, we're going to need an amendment, yeah.
Can you ask to have a civil appeal? Can you appeal a civil action?
Well, you could. The way that it's written right now, I'm sorry, I assume that was directed to me.
Yeah.
The way that it's written right now, your appeal is to go to the Athens Police Department and be cited into court for a minor misdemeanor. So that's, as this legislation is drafted right now, that's what you've got. If you're asking would there be potentially other ways to appeal it, there certainly would. You could create a board of appeals the way that we have other boards of appeals set up throughout the city, but that would,
So it would require the person who had the nuisance party ticket to go to the police department and say, please write me
a citation.
a citation.
Right. In
But-
which case you get your hearing, your day in court and your opportunity to contest.
But
what
if they were found guilty under that citation, then it's now on their record.
That's correct.
So
As
they-
it's written right now, that's what would happen, yes.
Okay. And that only carries a what kind of penalty?
That would be the on a first offense, that would be a minor misdemeanor of $150.
So either way, it could be $150. Plus, if they appeal it, get a citation and lose, is there court costs?
There could be, that's up to the discretion of the judge.
So it's kind of
Typically, yes, that would be a typical.
a lottery if you appeal it and get a
It's on
citation.
their criminal record now.
Well, it's potentially on their criminal record.
No, it would be on their criminal record if they're found guilty.
Right.
After the appeal.
So
Right.
any chance of law school is kind of out the door.
Member Nisley.
I will, I respect everybody's opinions, and I too was interested in a higher fee, but in the purpose of moving this along in light of the law director's additional information, I move to amend ordinance 8314.
I second.
What's the amendment?
And the amendment would be that we change the wording in line 3 that says the violation of section 9.14.02 shall be an administrative offense requiring a fine of $150. Would that adequately take care of that?
Did you,
So this would change, the only wording I think that would change is to reduce the $250 fine and make it $150. So that's the only wording we're changing.
Mayor?
Question, so the thrust of this is actually, so if you, and again, we don't always cite people for nuisance party, usually just the threat of it shuts down the party. Somebody, we tell them to cease and desist, stop the party, everybody go home. Somebody says no, or they kind of give us a hard time, and we give them a citation. The citation, because it's 150, is an administrative citation, which has no criminality to it, but a fine. $150 as movement. If they say, I want to contest this, they would go to this police station and say, I can contest this, please cite me as a minor misdemeanor. Now I'm in the court system, I have my day in court, I've got a chance of winning and therefore getting everything off, not guilty or losing, and at that point becoming something on my record, as well as $150, because that's the max you can have with this misdemeanor, and plus court fees, which usually run a little bit over $100, I believe. Although, as I said, the judge can waive that. If in 6 months they actually are, the party house of, Animal House renown or something, then we'd probably see them cited again at the 250 level. I believe that's how it works, okay? And really, if I understand the thrust of this, was to take the criminality out of it, which really gave us as a city, or as a police force, if I understand, the ability to actually give one of these things out more casually, if need be, without that criminal stigma attached to it that would affect everybody for their record. In terms of expungement, that is a methodology to get around that at a later date, but that really still is something that they'd have to initiate as well, right?
Yeah, it essentially works the same way as a parking ticket would be one way to think about it. So, if we don't have a parking, court of appeals or anything here set up in town, if you want to contest a ticket, then you get cited into court, and that is your due process. That is your appeal, that is your hearing. So it would basically, I think that's where the chief was modeling this off of, was the idea of a traffic ticket.
Okay.
Parking ticket.
I just want to make clear what's going on here, okay? No problem. Just asking.
Quick question on clarification too. Could more than one individual in a household be cited with this as well? So if there's 3 or 4 people living there,
No.
the burden is on just one of them,
And
even though they
one
all
member of
may
that household.
equally be raging. Okay.
Now, if they go in and they identify individuals who are intoxicated underage
Sure.
or drinking underage, things of that nature, then they can start working their way through just the normal nuisance party. There's a whole sundry of items under the
Right.
nuisance party ordinance. Everything from noise to disorderly conduct to litter, to public intox, drinking, it goes on and on. And so any of those facets come into play while they're there. If they're serving someone with a civil fine and, somebody has clearly had too much to drink and they ask them for their ID and that individual brings forth an ID that shows that they're 19.
Yeah.
We have a proposed change in the ordinance. Would you want to read that again as proposed,
Okay.
if you could remember it?
What I'm proposing is changing in line 3 of the wording of our revision to the nuisance ordinance. And so it will say, a violation of section 9.14.02 shall be an administrative offense requiring a fine of $150.
But it is, my ordinance says .03. Is that correct?
reading it.
This ordinance says 9.14.02,
Further down, it says
Further down,
14.03.
Oh,
that's the only text that's changed.
Okay,
Oh,
so
now
this
is
is-
that-
Well, we have the order to cease and desist. Disperse is the 91403. And then the penalty is changing as well. So we also added, shall be guilty of a 4th-degree misdemeanor to the cease and disperse.
Do we need additional language? No.
No.
Okay.
No.
Really, all we're just changing is the one number.
150,
Okay, I'm sorry.
250 to 150.
I didn't read the whole thing. Okay, so we have a proposal to change the language in the ordinance to add the words penalty of $150. All those in favor of this amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, and then we're up for first reading or second reading?
It will have been amended and read for the first time, assuming that
Okay,
just passed.
so, okay, moving on. Member Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, in long conversation in committee, we were talking about this particular ordinance where we're changing the language to what used to be the loud dog ordinance and changing it to loud animal ordinance. And also, if you remember in committee initially, going back some time now, we were talking about having it be restricted to outside. This goes back to its original text to where it doesn't talk about whether it's outside or inside in terms of the loud animal. It would still have to be prima facie where the animal is heard from 50 feet away and for an extended period of time.
Okay. Could we have anybody that wanted to speak about that? No? Okay.
Member Knightley?
Just to add a point that came up in discussion, that if people are reading this ordinance, it says between the hours of 12 a.m. and 7 a.m. And then weeknights, on that weekends, and then weeknights is 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. And that's when the police can come if they hear it. It does not need to be reported as a complaint. But just like our noise ordinance can be enforced 24 hours a day. So it's just when it's not those late night hours, anybody can call the police department if they hear animals in this case.
Okay, thank you. Ordinance 8514, Member Patterson again.
Thank you, Mr. President. This particular ordinance is to, number one, get the ball rolling on having a structural integrity as well as improvement study for the armory, which would be appropriating $7,000 from the enhancement fund. And also to authorize the mayor to accept donations for either the study, design, or renovation to the armory. There currently exists a line item in the budget that speaks specifically to the armory / Hudson, which is another structure that we have down on the end of Hudson. But underneath this would be a donation line that would be specific to the armory for armory renovations or feasibility studies or anything else for that matter.
I just have a question.
Audrey?
Why are we appropriating 7,000 but authorizing 6,500?
There's the Convention and Visitors Bureau would like to donate $500, so we need to have the donation line in order to put that in.
Would still need to be appropriated.
Yeah, it still needs to be appropriate if you want to spend their 500.
So we need to appropriate
So what you're saying is, we're prepared to pay 6,500 of our money.
Yes.
But, yeah, we still have to appropriate the donation if we want to spend it. So they really should just match up no matter where the money
Comes from. Yeah.
Can we put that in this ordinance, or does it
You
need
can
to be?
amend it.
probably should. If you're
The
going to
7,000.
spend, 7,000, that should be the authorization as well as the appropriation.
So then a motion to,
I'll move to amend the ordinance so that Section 3 of this authorizes the expenditure of $7,000 from the Athens Enhancement Fund.
And I'd like to second the amendment.
Do we need to say where that 500 comes from? No? We're just,
Well, donations, we're expecting donations, no matter who it's from, and that's fine, but the mayor still needs the authorization to spend that money that we've appropriated, no matter whether it's all from money we already have or money that we might take in.
Not to exceed 7,000.
we are moving to change the language in Section 3 from $6,500 to $7,000. And everything else remains the same. All those in favor of that amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. This ordinance is read then for the first time. And we're going to move on to ordinance 8614. An ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into an agreement with the Board of Athens County Commissioners to extend sanitary sewer collection services to unincorporated portions of the county. Introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you, Mr. President. We've talked about this last week, and it's been in the works for a year and a half. And I'm sure everybody went home and read their memorandum sitting on their bedside table. And if there's any questions, we can entertain questions, or it will be read 3 times. We don't need to suspend. So,
Do you have any questions?
questions about sewer?
We'll move on. Okay, on the wrong page. Ordinance 8714, again, introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we suspend the rules on this because the mayor needs to enter into agreement in order to fulfill this by the
Second?
end of the month,
Second?
As soon as possible.
as soon as possible. Okay.
All those in favor of suspending the rules on ordinance 8714 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The rules have been suspended.
I move that we adopt 8714
Second?
Under suspension of the rules.
under suspension. We talked about this last week also. It's to enter into Southeast Ohio Public Energy Council, establishing this process. And this, comes from, we voted as the county and the city for aggregation, electrical aggregation. This is one of the steps that we are doing in order to fulfill that ballot initiative that was put on.
Questions? Mary has something to say?
This is to establish a council of governments, that it's a form to enable us to add other villages as they come online in November. The concept right now is that we are worked our way in as a certified aggregator with the PUCO, both the county and the city, but of course, since then, Angel has come on board, and I think Bucktail, Jacksonville, and Tremblay, I think, are the ones in November. So rather than have to go back to the PCO every time and say, we are now certified aggregation for the Athens Incorporated and unincorporated and this, and this, we're going to create a structure. There's a similar structure up in Northern Ohio, NOPEC, which is about 140 members from townships and villages to the counties. So we're modeling after them. We're getting assistance from them because they like what we're doing down here. And the idea is to get this done as fast as possible so we can get it to the PCO, get it approved, work out the bits and pieces. I'll keep you informed of it. You've got 2 council members who attend regularly, so they'll keep you apprised of what's happening. The negotiations are ongoing with 2 different entities, and the hope is we'll get this all done mid-November at the latest, I hope. We'll see.
So I'd like to point out that this is all in accordance with one of those Ohio revised codes that we're always talking about, 167. So it does have an overall form and function that's set out by the ORC.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions? So,
Okay, all those in favor of adopting ordinance 8714 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The ordinance is adopted under suspension of the rules. Okay. Ordinance 8814, an ordinance amending ordinance 106-06, granting variances from the Athens City subdivision regulations for property located outside the corporate limits but within the 3-mile jurisdiction to allow a minor lot split. Also, Member Paul.
Oh, thank you. We talked about this last week. It's within our 3-mile jurisdiction. It's fairly routine. What it's basically doing is amending an old ordinance to reflect the facts on the ground, because there's a fence along where the old ordinance says there shouldn't be, but it's the flag lot that's behind it has already been developed out, and they don't need a large driveway. So, housekeeping. This has already gone through the Planning Commission.
Moving on to ordinance 8914, an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 5, Public Utilities, Chapter 5.02, Garbage and Rubbish, Section 5.02.03, Preparation and Storage. Introduced by Councilmember Paul.
Thank you, Mr. President. We talked a long time about this last week, and this has been in the works for quite a while. I think that given everybody's discussion last week and the work that has been done with various residents and neighborhood associations, it's been fine-tuned. I want to point out that the basic fine-tuning was that the lot, when we talked about on Monday, didn't have the front of the house, and that was, from what people were saying is that was really not what they meant. However, there was this discussion with people who are on corner lots and such, so it's now defined from the property street address for cans. So basically, it's positioning and keeping your yard clean for aesthetics, for health and safety. So it's changed that way, and also has a longer lead-in time than a regular ordinance. Usually it's 30 days. This won't take effect until January 2015. And then also increases the fines for going against it. So, Steve, is there something else? We talked about this quite a bit.
No, other than one of the things
Oh,
that
that's right.
did come up was there was a lot of conversation about, initially, topography was one of the words that was in there, and that has been removed when we were having a discussion anyway about the waivers of placement may be granted by the service safety director or his or her designated due to age, disability, or extenuating circumstances, which was something that we discussed about at length as well.
Mayor?
At staff meeting, it was brought up that we may want to look at I think in code is the tenant landlord form. I believe somewhere buried in there is the fine schedule, which might have to be adjusted. So
Okay.
we'll have to go back and look at that particular piece of legislation as well. I need to check on it. That was just brought up this morning.
Right. Yeah,
and,
that makes sense. You change one part of the code, and it kind of ripples through.
Well, yeah.
One of the things, I'm sorry. Never nicely.
Well, I was just going to also say that during the discussion last week, we talked about a lot of education, so I'd just like to reiterate that we need to spend that time between now and January 1 also informing people. So if their garbage can is at the end of their driveway and visible in their carport, that no longer will be acceptable. So including, I think the code director told us that 4 of us were in violation of the code as it currently exists, or as it would be proposed to be changed.
You still haven't told us who.
No, he hasn't. But we'll make sure and change our behaviors by January 1. So it's going to mean a lot of work, I think on our city website, out in the paper. I don't know if we have the ability to do the water billing, saying rules are going to change. And then Barb Harrison's community service, community assistance work with students who are living on campus. They have a newsletter too.
I think I agree 100% with what you're saying, just because it's the one whereas that's in here, which speaks directly to that, is that giving the citizens of Athens a spin-up time to walk out in your front yard and look at your property and go, oops, yeah, I can see it, or whatever. Because this ordinance, as it works its way through, as long as there's no major hiccups, it'll be signed into law in early November. So it's giving people enough time to where roughly 6 weeks before January. The other thing that certainly was thought about a lot when crafting this was that a lot of the Ohio University student body will be on Christmas recess during that period, and it'll give landlords enough time to bring things up to speed to make sure that there's a flyer, a notice. Please note that your trash can has now been moved to behind. So I think there's a lot of forethought that went into a lot of this process. And I think time is key here, giving people time to adjust.
Mayor Weil,
Yes.
can we direct citizens to the code office for some help if they are
Probably
having
so,
a problem?
Yeah.
So that's a real possibility also.
I suspect we'll probably put something together for warnings first. I mean, that would be the best indication of what's going on, if somebody gets a warning and they know it's applicable to them. So lead time, put it on the water bill, we'll go from there. And contact code.
I think
Code's always
something on the website, before and after, and good management practices and pictures. I think, some of the pictures that Michelle brought in last week were really helpful. And, we can do, good garbage cans and bad garbage cans. I don't know what you would want to call the slideshow, but.
Well, you could always do it yourselves. 4 of you can have that opportunity, it sounds like. I'm not sure which 4 either.
Okay. Ordinance 9014, An ordinance amending Athens City Code, Title 29, Housing Regulations, Chapter 29.12, Premises Conditions, Sections 29.12.01, Sanitary Requirements, and 29.12.02, Citation. Member Fall again.
Thank you, Mr. President. We talked about this last week. This is, I think, it's changing the fine structure and expanding the definition for sanitary requirements. It just said, accumulation of rubbish or garbage. It's more specific in its definition about what exactly is rubbish and garbage, and makes it a larger penalty for going and having loose garbage around your front of your house, around where your garbage cans are, broken bags, overflowing containers, that sort of thing.
Okay. Questions? Comments? Yes, from the city. Can you?
Actually, I wanted.
Could you please come up to the microphone and introduce yourself? And
Joan Konansky. I wanted to make a comment about what Council just passed through, Section 50203A. Oh no, back up, wrong page. Sorry.
Preparation.
Oh, yes, it is. That's correct. I'm sorry. Section A. In that, I've been thinking over the concern about the corner lot, and I would like to make a recommendation based on the fact that within the city code itself, there's many exceptions or specific directions for corner lots, whether it's parking or setbacks or various things. And I drove around the city today looking at many corner lots. I mean, every block has two, right? So corner lots are not an anomaly, right? It's a situation that we have to deal with. So what I would like to recommend is that the language under this section, Section A of 50203, 1, 2, 3, 4, beginning at the end of the fourth line, shall be kept in containers stored out of view from the street or street address view for corner lots, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because I think it needs to be distinct, because somebody's going to drive along a corner lot and not even think about that's not the street address. We have some corner lots that are positioned awkwardly, and I think just to identify that for a corner lot is important. And I understand the reasoning for the corner lot situation. I also think it might be confusing for some people to read street address as opposed to from the street view. So in general, most people will have from the street view, but in particular, all the corner lots will have or street address view for corner lots. Anyways, it's a suggestion. It's something I've been thinking about today and jotted a few notes on that. So I don't know, what does anyone think about that?
I think something we discussed last week was not only corner lots, which are recognized, but there's also quite a number of houses that have back streets. And,
Through lots.
Through lots or alleys that are streets. That's a different situation. Some people have garages that they access from the alley, from a road from the back and stuff. So this is trying to define, because we also discussed about you could theoretically walk around on the street and see almost anybody's garbage can. So I think that was something that was discussed last week about how you can, go searching and you can see almost anything. So it's trying to define it so that people have kind of a map to follow. That's kind of what I got from last week.
Could I hear one more time Joni's suggestion on the wording, if we were to consider it? Because if we were going to consider it, I wonder if maybe we could, if we did want
We'd have to
to,
go
if we wanted
back.
to amend tonight, or,
We'd have to revisit this.
yeah.
I'm not really
Are we still on
comfortable
89 on the
amending
agenda?
it.
We went back.
We've already moved
We
on.
went back.
Are we on
We moved
Yeah,
on.
she
We've
went
moved
back. She
on.
didn't
Next
realize
item,
we'd moved
we'd have to
forward.
go back to revisit this one. Is that correct? Under the
Yeah.
rules?
Because we started discussion on,
I put my hand up,
Her
but
hand was
nobody
up.
saw me.
I saw her hand.
But
You
we
didn't
didn't
count?
see her.
You did too.
Well, I think though that I'm not comfortable right now amending using wording that's amorphous when I haven't, gone to look exactly how street corners are dealt with and exactly with wording and trying to figure out wording right here. I don't think that this is an appropriate place.
But could I just hear her suggestion? Not that we have to decide it tonight, but just hear your suggested. Are you firm enough on that, Joni, that you've got?
Sure. So, under 50203A, starting from the fourth line, this would be the same, shall be kept in containers stored out of view from the street view or street address view for corner lots. And then it would continue except in the containers or at the curbside for pickup.
Thank you.
That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have one other point to make.
yes.
In the bolded, waivers for placement may be granted by the service safety director or his or her designee. Now, we've clarified age, disability, or extenuating circumstances. One of the reasons we are even discussing that tonight is because of an administrative decision that was made over the years about this particular ordinance and what was going to be cited and what wasn't. We do have service safety directors who change over time. We have administrations that change over time. Extenuating circumstances could be just about anything. And so from a ordinance point of view, I don't know that, I know that we had long and deep discussion about this, but from an ordinance point of view, to me, somebody could do what they want to do in the end anyways. So I'm very much concerned about that because we've spent so much time discussing this, and if somebody decides, well, in my viewpoint, that's an extenuating circumstance, yet all the people that passed the ordinance would have said, well, we don't think that. I think that leaves too much room for interpretation, in my opinion.
I think something that was discussed was an extenuating circumstance, maybe pregnancy, which is not a disability. But you're saying it gives too much wiggle room. Is that the extenuating circumstances?
I would say so.
Oh, and this is a waiver. I think that a waiver is different than just somebody sitting there saying, that we're doing it because this is the extenuating circumstance for the week. I think you have, like, people might have gone to the hospital and gotten surgery, or, there's different things, and it was trying to, I guess it does give wiggle room, but it's also providing for circumstances that,
I understand that. I don't have
Yeah.
a problem with that, and I think anything like that is reasonable. I'm just saying that one of the reasons we are here tonight reviewing and editing this ordinance is because of a situation that had developed over a several-year period of time. And citizens, council members alike, some of us, were kind of done with it and outraged. So here we are looking at the ordinance and trying to figure out the language to tighten up, if you would, the language. And
well, what I would suggest, since that we need to write down these particular changes and go over on next Monday in the committee meeting.
I'm good with that.
Because I have to say, though, any ordinance we pass, we're legislative, and the administrative administers it, so they can do that. That's why you can do it with any ordinance that we have. So it's the wiggle room that you're not comfortable with. However, people administer things in all different ways too.
You can't plan for everything.
Right, can't plan for everything. So
I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that maybe it's the language, and maybe the law director can help us with that language to tighten that up. I don't know, but yes.
And I'd be interested in seeing that too, because we could say something like permanent or temporary physical condition, which might take care of the broken leg, pregnancy, difficult pregnancy, or something like that.
Yeah, I guess just since I was kind of invited into the conversation, I might certainly agree with Member Pappy's point that by saying extenuating circumstances and leaving that up to the discretion of a third party, who knows who that third party may be at some point in time and can make any interpretation they want. But yet at the same time, of course, I think this is the point that maybe Member Fall was getting to. Anytime you've got a legislature passing the laws and then an executive enforcing them, I mean, it's not out of the question that you could also have an executive saying, I'm just not going to enforce this. And that's, all there is to it. I mean, there's really, council can't force administrative action on anything. So, but, with that said, if you want me to help try to work out some language that kind of meets a happy medium in there, I'm certainly more than happy to do that. Thank you.
Can you spell waiver correctly, too? Okay, I think we're moving on. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just have a comment, and I don't know that this came up last week, but I think it's come up in our neighborhood association meetings. And this wording seems to be right now only applying to some of the individual's extenuating circumstances. But I think that as you were talking about the corner lots and different situations, somebody might not be on a corner lot, but their lot might drop off as soon as you walk out the back door. There are other extenuating circumstances involved in their property that could also make for an exception. And so,
Well, we talked about screenage and different things last week at length and showed pictures of different ways to, again, keep it from view of the street even though you have a cliff off the back of your property.
that's not always going to be possible. There are plenty of houses in town that have very little space in between them, and the one next door, if the back of their lot drops off. I just think you need to keep it open to different situations.
Member Patterson?
Yes, I agree with Auditor Heck on that issue because it is something that we did talk about. The language as it originally existed in here had the line topographical. So you're talking about property, it was struck from there because that was vague. So it's like, so what are you talking about topographically? Is my land too flat to have a can on? Whatever. But I agree that if you have a small parcel and you're surrounded by slopes on steep grade because you're built on a hillside, it could be next to impossible to place your can or to be on a corner lot. I know we had a long drawn out conversation to where we came up with the current language, which is stored out of view from the property street address. Because there are houses around here that have secondary streets that are running along some other areas. So if we go back to view from the street or the property's address street or a corner, it's through my lens, it's kind of going backwards, going back to what we had originally, which would have been out of view. If you remember, that's what Director Paskey was talking about, to where, as it read, even though it's a typographical error, the strike through was just completely out of view. Well, that means that you could stand, on your neighbor's balcony and look over and go, well, I can see their trash can in their backyard. That's been corrected. But my point being is if we put too many changes in terms of that one particular sentence, I think it drives it all the way back to where we were starting from a week ago.
Can I suggest that Mr. Lang can supply some language for the extenuating circumstances?
I'm happy to look into that. I would suggest that's really more of a committee assignment than, I can help draft language, but
Well, just to help us craft the wording.
I mean, we're going to have to draw a line somewhere between listing every conceivable,
So,
circumstance and just keeping it
Maybe
as
throw
vague
out
as it is now.
some language that would make sense, and revisit this on Monday, so that, because we'll have to, I mean, I don't see it amending it tonight, so we need to discuss it Monday to put in the right wording, to make it not too extenuating and not, you know, just to make it just right, so we can have the little, you know.
I guess just what I'm saying is and it's no, not directed to anyone in particular, I don't know what council wants. I really don't. So I can draft all the language in the world, but I don't know that it would be accurately getting at, I'm not sure we have a consensus on council on this point right now. And until we do, I can't really be much of a help in crafting language to that effect.
Well, I guess from what Member Pappy has said, is not as making it so that the future people who read this understand that we aren't draconian in what we're doing, and that there are extenuating circumstances, whether that's topographic or, and how, you know, how we see doing that. And I don't know, because you're a legislative wordsmith.
I am a wordsmith, thank you. Nicest thing anyone has said about me in a long time. But no, I'm happy to work with you, and maybe this is a better conversation to have when we're outside the meeting there, but, yeah.
This should be going to committee at this point, I explained, well, if you're going to start playing with the wordage, think about 50202 definition, B, container is no larger than 30 gallons. I said that for Mrs. Spofford, who has talked about that for many years, so if you're going to augment this and modify it. Right now, if I was going to say I follow the law, everybody with a container over 30 gallons would be cited, I believe. But that probably means all of us, except those who put bags out. Well, maybe if they're greater than 30-gallon bags, you're in trouble. So let's take this over to a committee. Now you have a committee next week.
That's what you've decided already, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I think we've dealt with ordinance 9014. I'm going to move on to ordinance 9114. An ordinance amending Athens City Code, Title 5, Chapter 5.02, garbage and rubbish, sections 5.02.11, uncollected rubbish and refuse and nuisance. Member Paul.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is basically housekeeping. When John Paskey was going through looking at all the other changes and possible changes that we were making, he noticed that this was not cited in the correct way, so it needs to be changed from the section that is cited from 29.13.01D to 29.12.02. It's just worded. Yeah, housekeeping.
Okay. Ordinance 9214, an ordinance declaring canine equipment no longer needed for a municipal purpose and authorizing the mayor to donate the same to Athens County Sheriff's Office. Member Nisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. As discussed in committee meeting last night, the officer who was in charge of the current canine program for the Athens City Police has retired, and I'm not sure how to phrase it correctly, but the dog and that program, the canine program, will no longer be used by the city of Athens. So we will be donating the equipment to where it can be used by the Athens County Sheriff's Office.
Moving on to ordinance 9314, an ordinance providing for the issuance of $573,411 of notes by the city of Athens, Ohio, in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying part of the cost of acquiring a new pumper truck and related equipment, and declaring an emergency. Member Nisley again.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the financial end of a discussion that we've been having for several months about the need to replace the city's 1991 pumper truck. And we have received a quote of $598,411. We will be making a down payment from city funds of $25,000. So that brings the amount out that we will need to take the note out on to $573,411. We will be borrowing this from the Hocking Valley Bank, and I believe the auditor had negotiated or had obtained a rate of 0.3%. So thanks to you and thanks to the Hocking Valley Bank. And the new pumper truck will replace one of ours that the city's been using, I believe, since, was it Councilmember Patterson, 1991? 1991. Date of the truck, so it's well beyond its useful life, and we're needing to move this forward. We are not suspending on this ordinance and some of the other ordinances for the fire truck because the company that we have accepted the bid from has extended the pricing to October 31st, so we're able to go through all three readings on all the ordinances.
Okay, and we're going to move on with another pumper truck ordinance. Ordinance 9414, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into contract with Pierce Manufacturing to purchase a fire pumper truck and declaring an emergency. Member Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, this would be, as was stated, to allow the Service Safety Director to enter into contract with Pierce Manufacturing, who would be making off the line the replacement pumper truck, and also and authorized to expend up to $598,411 on this particular truck, which includes, I believe, the hoses and nozzles for this particular piece of equipment. And again, to reiterate, I've said this several times, but it's important to make note that, again, Ohio University's agreement through the MOU to continue for another 5 years, an additional $250,000, which would be going towards this particular piece of equipment.
Comments? Ordinance 9514, an ordinance declaring the fire pumper truck no longer needed for a municipal purpose, introduced by Councilmember Nisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I see there's a minor correction for us. What this allows us to do, this ordinance would be to dispose of our 1992 pumper truck. So that's when it was made. And when we have something that's an asset, yeah, but it still does put it 3 years beyond its useful replacement life, as Councilmember Patterson was pointing out. So when we have something that's an asset on the city books, then what we need to do is authorize the city to be able to dispose of this. So it will be accepted, dispose of it by trade-in with a sealed minimum bid of $25,000 or outright purchase by other governmental agencies or nonprofit 501c. I think that's 501c3 organizations.
Ordinance 9614, an ordinance amending the 2014 appropriation ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. President. This particular ordinance has one section to it that pertains to the finances, and what this will do is appropriate $5,000 additional dollars for the Richland house that is owned by the city and is being currently rehabilitated. Many of the funds for this rehabilitation are being provided by the Community Development Block Grant Program. So there's $5,000 additional needed, I'm assuming, for costs they've run into as they've been rehabilitating that.
Totally, yeah.
Okay. And it is, people can see that as they're driving down on Richland Avenue. The house is located adjacent to the Richland Avenue Fire Department. And so we've been watching over the days as it's been roofing removed, siding removed, and it's basically being gutted and rehabilitated and made accessible so that the house can be used as rental.
Yeah. The intent, of course, at this point would be to turn it over to Metropolitan Housing Authority for low and moderate income occupancy when it's done.
Thank you. I was just going to ask you to say that, yes. Auditor Heck?
Oh, I was just going to point out that the total cost of the rehab will be slightly over $75,000.
Okay. That takes care of everything. We need a motion to accept the auditor's August 2014 financial reports. Do you have a motion to accept those?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of accepting the auditor's August 2014 report signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you. And now we have an opportunity.
Mr. President,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
we have one more motion to make. It's for the Commission on Disabilities.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Commission on Disabilities has a reappointment, so therefore I'd like to make a motion to reappoint Scott Dennis onto the Commission on Disabilities. A little background on Scott is that he has been a longtime employee at Havar here in Athens. He's also one of the leaders on what's called the CAT team, the Community Action Team, which is a group that seeks to find employment for people living with disabilities. And he's served several terms on the Commission on Disabilities, so to have him stay on lends a lot of continuity in terms of historical context for the Commission, but also the connection with Havar, which we believe is important. So therefore, a motion to reappoint Scott Dennis onto the Commission on Disabilities.
Second.
Okay, I'm sorry. We were talking. All those in favor of accepting this member for the committee signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you, Member Patterson. Thank you. What we were talking about is the very first ordinance that we read this evening about road salt. It had actually been introduced and read for second reading, and should have been read for the third time. So we need to amend the agenda, go back and add this onto it, and then have third reading. Okay? Could I have an amendment to the agenda?
I move to amend the agenda to reflect a third reading for 8114.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of amending the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, this is ordinance 8114, an ordinance authorizing the purchase of road salt for the street department and softening salt for the water treatment plant and declaring emergency. Member Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. President. After I rifle through all my paperwork to find this particular ordinance. Again, this is to authorize to accept bids where necessary for the purchase of road salt as well as water softening salt for the water treatment plant, as well as to authorize expenditure of up to $280,000, of which $200,000 would be coming out of the water fund, 740, TC 200, and $80,000 coming out of the street fund, which is 220. Therefore, I'd like to make a motion to accept ordinance 81-14.
Second.
All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 8114 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. This ordinance is adopted. Now, again, we have a moment for. I'm out of paper here. For members of the audience who would like to speak. We've already had one member speak. Anybody else want to say anything to us? Okay. I then move to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. We are adjourned. You second that.